Welcome. All right, everybody, welcome to the Strong Brain Institute Resilience Speaker Series. I'm Diana Moreland. I'm the Associate Director of Training, Implementation, and Dissemination with the Strong Brain Institute, and I'm really delighted to be here with you all. This is our first part of a three-part series for a resilient return to the academic year. And if you're not in academia, resilient return to just being a human in this world, in this time, in this season. And I am so delighted to have a colleague and friend here with me. We got to meet last winter, I think, at an academic resilience conference in Florida. And I heard her speak, and I needed to hear it, and I feel like we all need to hear what she has to share. So I'm delighted to introduce Nikita Gupta, who is a recognized leader that's worked internationally with diverse communities, educational leaders, and community service providers for over 25 years to transform trauma through healing and resilience. Nikita is the founder of the innovative GRIT coaching program at UCLA, where she serves students, staff, and faculty for over 10 years with resilience coaching and community healing programs. As a public health professional and facilitator, her work is rooted in practices of collective empowerment and social healing for individuals and service-based organizations. Through training, coaching, and collaboration, she aims to foster a culture of resilience as we bravely move through the unknown while finding joy in each day. Thank you so much for joining us. We are delighted to have you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Diana. It's really an honor to be here with you all, and hello to all of our participants out there. I'm originally from the South. My roots are in Texas and Kentucky, so it's really such a joy to connect back with folks who perhaps are closer to home geographically speaking. So as Diana mentioned, our session today is caring for ourselves while caring for others, and with the core of minimizing burnout and replenishing our empathy. And these ideas, the conversation on burnout, it was so interesting in the last couple of years post-pandemic. We see burnout all over the place. We are getting more research articles about it. We're talking about it more. We're noticing what it feels like in our bodies more. And so we're at a really wonderful point, I think, professionally and as caregivers, to start to address this topic in a really meaningful way, institutionally, and of course, within ourselves. So I'm really thrilled to be here with you all to share on this topic. I think Diana did a beautiful job sharing about my background. I won't go into too much depth, but here I am, working with, this is my first class of UCLA students. I was, a little bit older than my students at the time, and this is probably 15 years ago, but my work has really been centered in practices for healing. And I think it started off because I was a helper at home as a kid, as a firstborn daughter of immigrant parents. There was a lot of responsibility that I faced in my various identities, being in a conservative home in a kind of a conservative environment, born in Texas. There were a lot of factors that I had to contend with, and I didn't really have a language for it or know how. And I found myself in a helper role from a very early age, looking after my sister, looking after my folks in certain ways. And, it oriented myself and my nature towards looking outwards. And as I was doing that, I also needed to find a pathway to reconcile a lot of the emotions that I was feeling within myself. Years later, I started to teach yoga. I learned yoga, started to teach it. And more than the practice itself and what it's termed, I was really enamored by the idea of transformational spaces, because within a course of a 1 hour space, we can move from one state of feeling in our body to a very different state just by slowing down, by breathing, and by connecting with ourselves in the company of others. And so that became a really important question for me. So as I ventured forward into my role into my education as a public health student and then a professional, my goal was to bring these types of healing and transformational practices into the busy of spaces to provide access for everybody for this work. So that launched my work into, bringing these practices into UCLA, working with my students, our most at-promise students, where we're already so resilient. And when we think about resilience, resilience is already in our nature. It's something that we are born with. Our bodies are inherently resilient. If we think about it, each and every one of us started from a single cell organism, and then we grew into a multiple cell organism, into this body that we inhabit now, that allows us to experience life, express life in all the different ways. We are resilient by nature. And so the work really became about not becoming more resilient, but how do we tap into the resilience that is innate to our being? And by doing it, by connecting with the deepest part of ourselves, by slowing down and by reflecting. So that's what we're going to get to talk about today, do some practices in. And let me move us forward here to talk about the goals for our session. So, a couple of the goals is to put a framework on this idea of honoring our empathy. As caregivers, so many of us are, sorry about that, you all. My slides are moving on their own. Apologize, I'm not sure what's going on.
I've had a haunted slide deck before too. It happens.
Never happened before. Okay, it looks like it's stable. I'm just gonna release my fingers from the keyboard. But the goal for our session today to just ground in this idea of empathy. And what is empathy? What is this drive that we have that allows us to give, that allows us to witness others' stories, that allows us to take action for the benefit of others and for the benefits of the community that we serve? And to find resource within our bodies. So much of the idea of self-care, can often be externally focused, but I want to invite us to turn inward and see what do we have resource-wise in our bodies that we can access, even in the middle of a chaotic moment, in the middle of the workday, in the middle of an interaction where we may be caregiving to someone else. And then through this process to gain agency for our well-being and for our thriving. And everything that we do in our session today is absolutely translatable to different contexts. We can share this work with other folks in our community, as well as with the communities that we serve. So hopefully we can also look at this work with that meta lens and see, how can this be applied in so many ways? And the pathway that we're going to do achieve these goals by today we're going to start off by reflecting on our nervous system. And I'll share more about that later. And then we're going to get into learning and practicing strategies for replenishing our empathy daily. And so in that, we're going to do a practice, and all of our practices are by choice. We'll do a practice later in the session, and then share on more strategies for how we can restore and replenish in the daily moments of our lives. So hopefully that sounds okay for folks. Before, just a couple of more orientation pieces. We have a toolkit for our session. That toolkit will be emailed to you at the end. I'm also putting a link to the toolkit in the chat box right now. It's linked to a Google Drive, and you just download the PDF if you choose to, right from the link. And, as we get settled in here to the space, I'm going to also invite you all, because we want to start this work right now, just to notice that we have arrived here into a learning space together. Zoom is a funny format. We can't see some of the other folks who are there with us, but we know that there are other bodies here present with us. So maybe just to take a moment to acknowledge that we are here together in this virtual way. And if there's anything that you would like to grab and hold on to that may serve as a fidget toy or a fidgeting tool, I'm going to invite you all to bring that in right now. I often sit with stones or just little objects that my fingers can hold on to and play with. It's a way of discharging energy from our body. We come into these spaces, into learning spaces, into any spaces that we occupy with a sense of urgency. Oftentimes that we have urgency the second we wake up in the morning. Can anyone relate to that? The second we wake up, we've got our to-do list going. We got to get up, maybe get the kids ready, get breakfast ready, brush our own teeth, and then we're grabbing things as we run out the door. So just know, we often enter our days in a state of hurriedness. So fidgeting is a wonderful way to let that energy discharge and allow ourselves to ground in the moment. Someone shares in the chat, I guess my phone doesn't count as a fidget toy. Yes, I would like to invite us to not touch our phones right now, if that is possible. Someone shares chocolate covered marshmallow pumpkin doesn't either. You could maybe squish that around a little bit. But whatever that is, if you don't have an object next to you, honestly, this is a tissue. If you have a tissue next to you, you can even just feel the softness and see what it's like to give your body an opportunity to fidget right now. So hopefully that all makes sense. You know, a couple of other fidget toys that I like to bring into my educational spaces, into my meeting spaces, I have in my office when I meet with clients or students are pipe cleaners. Those are really low budget fidget toys. They're colorful, they're soft, they're bendy, they can make shapes. So just a few ideas that I want to throw out there as we begin this work today. So, and now we're going to just get to check in with one another. So as I mentioned, we're arriving here together in this virtual space, that there are many bodies here. We got to hear some of the folks share some of their roles. And so I want to invite you all to, we're going to share here in a moment, but before we do that, to just start to connect with yourself a little bit more. And so maybe you have a fidget item in your hands and you might start to notice the sensation and the texture of that item. And if you don't have an item with you, that is okay as well. You might just move your fingers along a surface that's in front of you, maybe along some of your clothing. You might move your fingers along a desk if that's in front of you. And just start to notice through the sensation of touch what it is that your fingers are picking up. And as you notice temperature, texture, softness, hardness of whatever it is that your hands may be sensing, I'm going to invite you to notice what's happening now on the inside of your body. That you might start to become aware of your breath. You might start to notice some other body sensations as you engage with the sense of touch. And we'll continue to slow down in this moment. There's not much to do in this moment. And just allow the breath to perhaps open a little bit more. And I'm going to invite us to bring in another sense. So if we have access to these senses in a way that feels okay for you, to maybe bring in the sense of sight right now. And take, using your eyes, using your sense of sight, maybe gaze around the room a little bit. So looking away from your computer and moving the eyes around the room a little bit, noticing lines, noticing colors, noticing textures. You may even turn your head over to the right, looking around you, behind you. And as you slowly gaze around the space, notice and be aware of what's happening inside of your body. You may look above you. Notice your breath as we orient our senses to the space that we're in. And I'm going to invite us to slowly come back. You know, after a few moments and minutes of doing this, it really starts to, you might notice that your body really getting into this practice a little bit more. And so notice, and we'll slowly come back to our space together. And just check in really quick, mindfully, how you feel right now, if you notice a shift in your being. And so what I'm going to invite us to do is to say hello in the chat. If you notice anything in your body as we did that activity, and then to maybe name any helper or caregiving roles that you currently hold. And this can be within your work identity. It can be within your family identity. And then maybe something that you hope to take away from today. So you don't have to answer all of those questions. Mostly would love to hear, how was that practice for you? And what are some caregiver roles that you occupy right now? So please feel free to share in the chat and we'll get a feel for where folks are at right now. And there's no right or wrong answer here. Give folks a few more moments. Beautiful. So someone shares, I noticed my breathing was shallow and quick. When I slowed down, my breath slowed down. Beautiful. So just that awareness of our breathing and shifting into a slower pace. And this person is a caregiver, a mentor, a teacher, supervisor, therapist, daughter, friend, sister, and mother. My goodness, so many caregiver roles embedded in that identity. Beautiful. Someone shares, I'm my family's go-to person. Yeah. I feel more relaxed after fidgeting with a squishy ball and focus on deep breath. Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. Relaxed, take care of older sister with movement disorder. Yeah. So many of what you all are sharing isn't even related to your work role right now. So thank you all for sharing. And, I'm going to invite folks to continue to share as you feel comfortable. Someone shares they notice their feet were hurting. Beautiful. As we start to pause and just notice what's happening inside, we become aware of a lot of things that maybe we weren't present for before, because our role is often faced externally. So keeping these pieces in mind and maybe staying connected to that slower breath. That practice that we did is an orientation grounding practice. That practice is in the toolkit that I shared with you all. And to plug into our senses and to look around the room helps to elicit a sense of embodied safety for us. So that's something that we can do in the middle of a busy moment, in between working with patients, maybe even just walking down the hallway to look around and orient yourself in the present moment. So here we go. I'm going to move us forward now to talking about this first idea that our empathy is a gift. And you all are sharing so much about the ways in which you show up for others. Your empathy is a gift. I'm going to invite you to repeat that to yourself, that my empathy is a gift. Feel free to say it out loud to yourself. My empathy is a gift. There's so many of us in the world who don't choose to operate in that way, and we probably are aware of this. There's a very small portion of the population that are really oriented to dedicating their energy to service, serving our families, serving our communities, serving in a professional way. And sometimes it's not by choice. Oftentimes it may not be by choice, and oftentimes it is. And there's many motivations for why we find ourselves in this work. It is purpose driven. It may be driven based on our own adversities that we've experienced in the past. And it is often rooted in a desire to make things better for those that come after us and those that are here with us. When we think about our empathy, one definition is a way of, just on the micro level of empathy, is understanding another's thoughts, feelings, and condition from their point of view rather than from one's own. That we are often putting ourselves in other people's shoes. And in the act of doing that, whether it's by listening or taking action, we are inherently not connected to our own needs in that moment, and we are facing another's. And so often when we're in this role day in and day out, we forget about our needs altogether. How many of us can relate to that? That we forget about our needs, that our needs may not even make it to our to-do list. At the end of our to-do list, it's like, oh yeah, I forgot I needed to take that walk today. Or I forgot I needed to go pick up that nourishing food so I could feed my body. Or how many of us in the middle of the workday skip going to the restroom because, let me just finish this email. Or, a student just came into my office and I've got to tend to them. Or a patient just came in and let me just go tend to their needs. Yeah. So folks seem to be resonating with that, as I see in the chat box, that we forget even to take care of our basic needs. And it just speaks to how oriented we are to the outer environment and not even to our inner body sensations, which can speak so loudly. The headaches that we're used to getting, oh yeah, I woke up with a headache. Oh, I got a headache in the evening. These are not just things that happen. They are your body saying, hello over there. Pay attention over here, just like your child might be saying, mom or dad or parent, I'm hungry. It's the way that our body communicates. So we are so often other oriented that we forget about to even pay attention to those signals from the inside. So coming back to the piece of empathy, empathy as well is an embodied experience. So I'm going to invite us to think about, ourselves in that caregiver role, that there is satisfaction that does come from it in a lot of cases, and especially in the places that we choose to be in that role. That empathy is an embodied experience. So how many of us have ever had that sensational experience of being in the body when we have an empathetic moment, when maybe we're offering our presence to somebody, and you see them light up, you see the aha in their face, you see them release tears and feel a sense of settling in their body. That is rewarding to our own bodies in some ways. Sometimes when we're in an empathetic moment or a giving moment, that you feel someone have success and your own joy expands because of that, or that you might feel your heart kind of like squeezing in and out. I get that body sensation often in a moment of empathy and connection. So empathy is an embodied experience, and there really is a satisfaction and a joy that we get from it. Now, when we're givers and we continue to give and give and give, we forget to even pay attention to that feeling, the reward that comes from our giving in a moment. Yeah. So I'm going to invite us to pay attention. One of the strategies is to pay attention when your giving is rewarding, and to give space to yourself to experience the compliment of that moment. And the compliment may come in a thank you from somebody, or in an email that you might receive, or just in leaving the office and feeling that exhale and a sense of satisfaction. So before we rush off to the next thing, the next meeting, the next person that we need to take care of, to give ourselves that moment of satisfaction and to let ourselves feel it. So let me see what folks are saying here in the chat box, that they're acknowledging that, yes, that it fills my cup to help others, and that our needs seem minimal when we compare them to others, when we tend to dismiss our own needs to make sure others are taken care of. And what a beautiful share that is from a true giver, that we put our needs second. It's a mindset that we have. It's a value system that we have. And it is a beautiful thing to be able to give. So much of health data says that helping others, being in service, actually improves our health. And that is absolutely true. And so for us who are oriented towards giving, and it is a mainstay of the fabric of our lives, it's so important to recognize when our giving is too much. When we think about our empathy, empathy is a gift, and it is an energy that is finite. Our empathy is finite, and it is renewable. It is finite and it is renewable, that we can refill our empathy every day in the act of a breath even. Our empathy can be regulated and replenished. So these are really important things. I feel as a giver who has worked with these principles for a long time because of my own burnout, seeing my students, my coaches burn out, my colleagues burn out, leave their jobs, and feel like, where is it that I can give now? In seeing this over the years, I've come to the realization that it is can be regulated and it can be replenished. And very important that our empathy, which is like the spotlight, that it's like, okay, who needs what? And that we can often sense what needs to happen, even sometimes before others know what they may need. That our empathy, which is that spotlight that is outward, must be turned inward. That we must shine that light within, and it is okay to do so. And you as a helper have permission to do so. It's okay to say no to one person, to say yes to yourself, and say, hey, mommy's got to take a break for 5 minutes. I'm going to go to my room, I'm going to close my door, and I'll be with you right after that. So it can be done even in small moments where we dedicate ourselves to ourselves. It doesn't have to take a long time. Or if somebody pops into your office and you just put that sandwich in your mouth. Anyone ever have that experience in the middle of a busy week where you're about to eat and take that nourishment, that energy in, and then someone pops in? And, we can get in a practice that says, hey, I'm just taking a few minutes to eat. Would you mind waiting outside for 10 minutes and I'll be right with you? if that's available within your schedule, or we can reschedule for tomorrow. That it's okay to do those things, and it's on a case by case basis. But to give ourselves flexibility, yet give ourselves flexibility and know that there are choices that we can make, even when it doesn't seem like there are. And I want to acknowledge what someone just shared, that sometimes it's easier said than done. Absolutely, 100% correct. And there are little tiny ways where we can infuse that, even if it's okay, let me take a breath, as creating a little boundary between myself and this next piece. So hopefully these are, mindsets that we get to embody as we think about how our empathy occurs to us, and that it really is a renewable resource. And so I'm going to provide another example here. And, this is, something, an example of working with somebody. And I know that many of us work with people in different ways. You might be physically mobile, tending to patient care, moving through different spaces in a fast-paced way. Or you might have one-on-one case management or counseling sessions with folks, or you might be sitting with a supervisee as an administrator. So this scene can look like a lot of different ways. This helper type of a scene can look like a lot of different ways. And so when we are with somebody, when we're with somebody in a helping situation, okay, so we're going to speak a little bit broadly here. We mentioned earlier this idea of compassion satisfaction, the satisfaction that comes to us by offering a space to somebody, by listening, by trying to problem solve, by offering care in the many ways that we do. That there may be connection, there's a fulfillment of purpose, an offering of care, which feels good to us as givers. There may be inspiration in that moment. No doubt, as many of the hundreds and hundreds of folks that I've sat with over the years, how much inspiration we gain from the people that surround us, that we are here to help, how much they give us back. And to acknowledge that and to find joy in those moments through our body, this idea of compassion satisfaction, that does occur. And as I mentioned, our empathy and our giving is an embodied experience. So when we sit with someone, when we exist with someone together in that moment of interaction, that there is this internal response happening within our nervous systems. And that's what this image here is of, our inner system, our filter for our life reality that processes our external experiences between one another, existing in the world, and internalizes it, transforms it into meaning in the form of thoughts, emotions, sensations, and interpretation. Our nervous system is the one that holds our joy and our sorrow simultaneously. And wow, have we been through a time together these last several years, pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, and now where we're at right now. In addition to focusing on supporting other people, we're thinking about, we have the environment that we're in, the climate change that we're experiencing, the political climate, chaos that we're experiencing, and so many things that our nervous system is regulating to all the time, that our bodies may not be feeling very safe in general, because there's a lot of uncertainty just across our systems. As even though we may have balance and find sanctuary, there's still a lot happening in the world around us. So when we sit with somebody, we are whole people. We always bring our whole person selves to an interaction. We might focus on a particular topic and focus on that person, but there's still things floating around inside of us. And so it's no wonder that we are experiencing a collective burnout as caregivers, as helping professionals. So when compassion satisfaction turns into compassion fatigue, that's what we want to pay attention to. And compassion fatigue can occur on a weekly basis. It might occur on a particularly hectic day when we haven't had time for space to be with ourselves, to restore. And it can occur over time, over years, leading to burnout, leading to vicarious trauma. So those are some terminologies that you may have heard about, and we'll talk about some of those in a moment. But this idea of compassion fatigue, and I'm going to bring up some ideas that maybe when we're with somebody, that also operating in the background sometimes is this, that The intensity of their story may just be disheartening. We think about ACEs and, the adverse childhood experiences that root in our bodies and that have cumulative effects over time if we're not mitigating these effects. Because in the same way that trauma affects our body adversely, healing can also affect our body and move us towards growth and rejuvenation. So to have, those pieces in place are really powerful. And you as a caregiver are facilitating that for someone else. But knowing that their emotions, their story, to bear witness to that can be really disheartening. Maybe their emotions are affecting you. Does anyone ever go home with, this feeling of heaviness that, hey, my day started out okay. I worked with a few patients, I worked with a few students or colleagues, and now I just feel heavy. I don't feel myself. That you might have even picked up other folks' emotion in the course of the day. So know that that's real, that our nervous system senses in three different directions. It senses our outer environment. It senses within, which is why we know when we're hungry, that our heart beats. So it's sensing within, and it also senses between one another. So emotions are contagious. This idea of emotional contagion, that we can go home with other people's emotions, especially if we're very open to that or have a high degree of empathy. Maybe their story feels familiar and brings up your own past. Many of us here in this work are on our own healing journey. And their story may remind you of your own story and pieces that may not have been reconciled, pieces that you wish could have been different in your own life, and so on. Maybe the heaviness of the work has just exhausted your empathy. So maybe year in, year out, story after story. As a college professional, there would be sometimes days where I'd interface with hundreds of people. If I was doing a large group workshop, also with small one-on-one case management, there'd be days I'd have 6 or 7 people crying in my office. And you think about the stories that we collect over time. By the end of the year, there have been maybe thousands of people that you've interacted with. And to bear witness to all of that does have a cumulative effect on our own bodies. Maybe their approach is triggering. Maybe it's a patient who has difficult emotions that they're presenting to you, and all you want to do is try and help them. Or maybe we feel responsible for fixing the situation. So can anyone relate to any of these pieces? I'm going to just invite folks to share in the chat box if any of this feels familiar to you, or if there are things that you want to add about when compassion becomes fatiguing to you, and what is it that you notice in your body. Just want to check in and see what folks are thinking about. Yeah, so someone shares that they feel responsible for fixing. Yeah. Anyone else want to share things that we can relate to, how compassion fatigue may present itself in our lived experience? Yeah, beautiful. Someone shares my body gets rigid and my creativity plummets. Beautiful awareness. That's exactly what happens when we feel that constriction inside. Feel too tired to problem solve. Yes, I can't even figure it out right now. It's too much to parse through. Difficulty sleeping, feeling hopeless for others at times. Really beautiful, you all. You've named some very powerful indicators from our body that, hey, you're tired and we need to restore and replenish. Yeah, really beautiful. Their emotions are affecting you. You feel like you're on eggshells, feels very tense. So these are wonderful, wonderful awarenesses, you all. You all are sharing very true things. And so even just as a quick strategy, when we notice these things in the middle of a moment, to expand your energy. And what I mean by that is to take a deeper breath and do that orientation. Look around your room and broaden your perspective, literally through the eyes, through the body, to broaden your view can help us to come out of that tunnel vision, the constriction, the tightness that we can feel when our empathy is exhausted. Yeah. Folks sharing aches in my body and exhaustion. Really, really beautiful body awareness, you all. So, you know, just to build upon that and to reinforce this idea that the expectation that we can be immersed in suffering and loss daily and not be touched by it is as unrealistic as expecting to be able to walk through water without getting wet. These stories, what we witness through our senses, they have an effect on our body, and over time they can take a toll. Burnout, one definition, emotional exhaustion, a depersonalization, and a depletion. Depersonalization meaning, I don't know why I do this work anymore. What's the point? There's no point in helping. The world is going to always have the same outcome. And I know for myself, I found myself saying those things many times, especially as it feels like we see things crumbling right in front of us. This is a difficult time that we're in, you all. And if we can just take it moment by moment and see, okay, even though things may not seem okay, what is going well right now? What is okay? How can I feel safety in my body in this moment, even if it's simply through my breath? Burnout is excessive and prolonged stress that so many of us experience in our work culture and with the responsibilities that we have outside of our work roles. And then combined with that, this definition, this idea of secondary trauma. So secondary trauma, I like to think of it as coming, this general experience that comes before vicarious trauma. So secondary trauma is the repeated exposure to details, distressing details of the trauma experienced by others. It's like seeing a movie of, traumatic stories over and over again for hours and hours every week, and it has an emotional effect on us if we don't counter that with other emotional states. So it's okay to bear witness. There's a power in bearing witness. We've chosen this role for reasons that there's a strength in us that probably develops over time as well, that we have the fortitude to do this. And sometimes it means cutting off our feelings. But what if it could mean that we can bear witness while still allowing ourselves to feel, while also being protected from too much taking on of the experiences of others? So these are challenging questions to perhaps hold, but I want to invite us to see that how can we do that? I wonder if that is possible. When we think about secondary trauma, it's also the physical and emotional wearing down over time. So thinking about, how has it been for you all in this period of time? Many of you are perhaps veteran professionals. Many of you may be new professionals or maybe new to a particular type of caregiving role. So noticing how these experiences affect us on a day-to-day basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly and yearly basis, just that awareness can help mitigate the effects of secondary trauma and burnout. Let me see what folks are saying. Depression of always being that person. Everyone relies on fixing whatever. Oh, yes. People sense that we are givers and we might be taken advantage of for that, or people just may come to us because they feel comforted by us. And at some point we said yes to that I like this role because it also makes me feel good. But as givers, we must also unlink the belief that our worthiness is tied to our giving. We are worthy because we are, and we are givers. Those are two separate ideas. And so how to tease those apart, that's a longer session. But looking at the mindsets that keep me saying yes to this role, and how do I create boundaries for myself, boundaries as self-care, boundaries not as being mean, as, part of cancel culture, but boundaries as self-care, as kind to myself and kind to others. So throwing out a few, general strategies in here as we look at some of these ideas. When we experience this burnout, compassion fatigue, again, they occur through our nervous system. And as an inner experience that occurs in our thoughts, where we feel that there's no time for me to rest, everyone, all of this depends on me, no one's here to help me, we might start to sound and feel resentful. Anyone ever get resentful with all the giving they do? And sometimes that's hard for us to admit. I'll be the first one to admit it, because I had to recognize that, man, thank you. Yes, Diana, admitting it is so powerful, because when we notice that resentment, number one indicator that I'm tired and I'm burnt out and I need to pull some stuff back, because nobody can take care of our resentment but ourselves. And how we do that is by saying, okay, where is my energy going out right now? And where can I curb that? How can I give less this week or even today? And every time we say yes, even the act of saying yes to ourselves gives us energy. It's not even about the thing. It's literally just the act of saying yes and having agency in how we give and how much we give. And I know that for many of us, that our giving can't be, we can't have always have boundaries around that, that sometimes our roles call for us to be in a giving state, but maybe there's ways that we can work within that. Can I tap out and have somebody else come in? Or there's many strategies, and we can talk about those strategies, maybe in a different session. The other piece here, and I do want to move into some of the actual strategies that we've practiced, body sensations. Some of you all mentioned headaches, tension, neck tension, jaw pain. Anyone ever get jaw pain? That's a big one that I've been focusing on lately and sharing about, because we hold frustration in our jaw. The jaw tension is the roar that doesn't get released. It's the roar of our frustration, the roar of our truth, that often when we work in institutional and bureaucratic spaces, we got to keep it together. We got to repress. We got to, just continue to play the part and continue to do our job. But where does that energy and frustration get to go? Because emotions, the word emotion comes from emovere in Latin, which means to move out. Our emotions are energies that need to move out, or they stay in. They create pain, inflammation, and other chronic situations that our body will experience. So being aware that this work is so important for your well-being, for your joy, for your creativity, for your thriving, and for your ability to give. Imagine that receiving can actually help me give more. It almost seems counterintuitive certainly to our helper mindset, which is oriented towards just energy out, energy out. But I want to invite us to embody the belief that as I receive, I can give more, especially if giving is a value for you. Sometimes I'm like, I'm tired of giving. I don't want to give as much. And that's okay too. And we can reorient and restructure how we do life to support that desire. So paying attention. So let's move into some of our strategy and practice here. I realize we're coming to the end of our time quickly. So, this quote, I love this image and this idea that sometimes we don't realize the weight of something we've been carrying until we feel the weight of its release. And as givers, so often we are, as I mentioned, we're just doing, and we don't often take a moment simply to pause and to notice what's here. The power of acknowledgement is the first step in a healing practice, in the idea of healing and restoration, is to acknowledge what is. If you all have experienced therapy or counseling, we acknowledge what is verbally in that modality. But what does it mean to acknowledge what is also through our body? And acknowledging what is through our sensation. By acknowledging sensation and emotion and inner thoughts is such a powerful way to initiate our healing and to replenish our empathy often. So again, the core of these principles are to pause, to slow down, to breathe, to move. And movement can be just little movement in the body. It doesn't have to be big movement. Certainly it can be. And then to reflect on what is happening inside of me. So I'm going to move into our strategy here. The first strategy, called body mapping. And I'm going to invite us into a practice right now. And there's a couple of ways we can do it. First of all, if you choose to not do the practice, that is totally fine. You're welcome to listen. And I want to invite you to use this few minutes as a time where you do get to settle your nervous system, to discharge sensations that you may be holding, and to release and free emotion. So breathe with us if you don't want to do the practice. This practice, I'm going to guide us as an inner practice. But no, this can be done externally, especially it's great for folks who we have a hard time going within. It doesn't feel comfortable closing our eyes, being inside of our body. And that is okay. Some days it's easier to go within than others. And that's really real. So you have a couple of choices here. So practice in a way that works for you. You can also have a scratch sheet of paper, and you can draw a shape of your body. Or if you want to do this as an internal practice, I'll start that guideline right now. So for all of us, however we choose to do this, I'm going to invite you all to again get connected to your breath. And just to notice your inhale and your exhale. And to know that this breath is with us from the moment we arrive on the planet. We get shaken, rubbed, maybe spanked on our little butts, and then we cry. And the doctor is like, okay, baby's fine. They got a breath. They're alive. Yeah, and so that's a simplified metaphor there. And then by the end of our lifespan, the last action we take is the breath. And so all of our life experiences are tied together by the rhythm, by the pace, by the flow of our beautiful breath. So I invite you to notice its inhale and exhale right now. And maybe starting to slow the breath down just a little bit more. And so as givers, making this time and the space to just pause and breathe is so powerful for preventing burnout, is so powerful for replenishing our empathy. And so as we breathe, for my folks who are doing an external practice, I'm going to invite you all to take a writing utensil and to scan down your body and just write down what you notice, maybe in your head, in your cheeks, in your jaw. You might draw shapes and lines to reflect that, oh, there's something happening here. You might write words down. So again, that's for my folks who want to write and draw out what's happening inside of their body. For my folks doing internal practice, I'm going to guide us through this practice, and we can all participate in this together. So as we breathe, I'm going to invite you to draw your awareness to the top of your head and just notice the top of your head and if there's any sensation that you notice there. And start to move your awareness down over your strong brain, this incredible brain that's sort of the computer for the body, that's connected to our brilliant nervous system. And noticing any thought, the sensation of your thought. Notice their quality, if they're fast moving, if they're slow. And then we'll start to continue to move down our body over the facial muscles, the back of the head. Noticing sensation there. For my folks who are using pen and paper, you can illustrate what it is that you're noticing. And then moving our awareness down the neck and the shoulders, over the chest and back. Just moving sensation down the body over the abdomen and lower back, pelvis, and hips. Moving your awareness down your legs, all the way down to the soles of your feet. And as you scan your body, notice what's happening in your breath. I missed the arms, so if you haven't scanned down your arms from the shoulders all the way down to your fingertips. And as you do that body scan, I'm going to now invite you all to place a hand over your heart and over your belly button. Moving into another strategy, and we can just stay in an internal space. For my folks who are doing this on pen and paper, you can also join in this part of the practice if you choose. If you have access to both of your hands, placing one hand over the heart, one hand over the belly button. Lightly placing the hands here in a gentle self-hold. And just notice the sensation in between, in the space between your hands and your body. What's the sensation in that space? And notice what it feels like for your loving hands, the hands that are part of a being that is giving, that is empathic, that puts others' needs before their own. What is it like to embrace your own being in a gentle way and to honor your giving, to honor your empathy? And as you breathe, I invite you to release sensation, move emotion. And I'll offer a couple of affirmations here that we may not always see the outcomes of our work, yet we can know it's important. I soften the pressure to be perfect. And I offer myself compassion when I feel frustrated by the barriers in my work. I honor my small successes, knowing that our collective efforts are meaningful for the whole. I allow myself space to pause and to breathe. And so we'll take in a couple of more breaths, just noticing this moment. Feel free to remove the hands from your body at any time, from your chest and belly at any time, relaxing them down. And notice your present moment experience. And as you feel ready, I'm going to invite you to come back to our space together, opening the eyes if they were closed, and feel free to move the body as we move inner energy, move emotion and sensation. The physical body may also want to move to integrate that. So you may stretch the arms, the legs, roll the shoulders, stretch your neck, whatever may feel good for you to enter into a more expanded state and perhaps less constricted within your present embodied experience. So we did a couple of practices. I just want to see if anyone wants to share in the chat a word or two to describe your present moment experience, how it feels now within your being. If anyone would like to share in the chat box, love to hear a couple of shares. And there's no right or wrong answer. Some of us may feel like, oh, that was really hard for me to do. And that is okay, that all experiences are possible here. Wonderful. Someone shares that they feel refreshed. Yeah. So the more that we take these spaces to pause, there's a cumulative effect on our nervous system. The less heaviness we take home with us. And so, we did two strategies. We did the strategy of the body scan. We did a self hold. So hand to heart, hand to belly. And, I want to share a couple more strategies before we move on to our closing, which is here in a couple of minutes. Where we can integrate this work, something that, I really started to do over the years in working with my students, with clients, and also training coaches on how to work one-on-one with other people, is to care for yourself really before, during, and after an interaction. I'm going to offer some ideas here about after an interaction. Notice the impact of an interaction within your mind and body. So when we come away from an interaction, sometimes we might feel heavy, we might feel a little spacey, we might feel a little bit more harried or agitated. These are indicators from your nervous system that there is an activation. So how can we settle that before moving on to the next thing? Super powerful. Doesn't mean that you're a bad caregiver. Doesn't mean that you don't like your patient or your student. Doesn't mean any of those things. It can just mean that there was an activation in my body. So some of the strategies can be, I'm going to take 3 minutes, set a 3-minute timer and journal and just let release what it is that I'm feeling in my body and mind. You might have a 1-minute dance party for vigorous body movement, just to shake out and release those sensations. You might place hand over heart, hand over belly. You might shift your focus by doing that orientation practice that we did, or you might connect with a colleague or someone there that can also support you. The other strategy I want to share as we come to a close is this quote, by Maya Angelou, that we delight in the beauty of the butterfly, but rarely admit that the changes it has gone through to achieve that beauty. That along the way, you all, as we do our caregiving, that this is a process and there is success and micro successes all along the way in this work, in showing up for other people. So let me just get to my next slide here. So the final strategy I want to share is that we want to affirm our efforts all the time and celebrate the micro successes. In the toolkit, there's a handout for you where you might start to document my invisible successes. So much of giving work is invisible. People don't even know what it is that we're doing. It doesn't get acknowledged by our systems that are in place, by the hierarchies, but you can acknowledge it for yourself and within your teams. So regularly asking the questions of, what am I proud of for myself now? How have I helped others? How have I helped myself? How have I been resilient? And so I'm gonna, just pause here. I know we're pretty much at the end of our time to see if there is time for any questions, or I can also turn it over to our organizers here, but just to see if there's anything coming through our chat or if anyone would like to say anything now. Questions, comments, reflections. Beautiful. Someone shares, what a great way to build positive affirmation. Absolutely. And that is part of this gratitude practice that we've heard so much about, that has been documented as a way to support our thriving. That in little tiny ways, we celebrate our giving. Celebrate, 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 because your empathy is what? Your empathy is a gift. So thank you all so much. I will, I'm here for questions if we have time, but I also want to, be respectful of your all's time. And maybe you can reflect on, what are you taking away from today that you could integrate into your daily practice? And how can we make a space for this work within our organization? So thank you all so much. It's been a real honor being here with you all. I'm sorry I missed some of the things in the chat, but I see that folks are supporting one another. So that is so beautiful. And, as a reminder that the times are urgent, let us slow down. Thank you all. Please feel free to be in touch. My email is here. There's a QR code for a fun poster, 8.5 by 11 poster I created to help us with these ideas in 2 minutes. What can we do to support our well-being, replenish our empathy? You can download that with the QR code, and please feel free to reach out. Thank you all. And thanks to our team here.
Thank you so much, Nikita. I'm feeling it and I'm seeing it, that this is just what so many of us needed. So we appreciate the reminder and the strategies and the space to slow down and to think about how we're caring for ourselves as we all are in the work of caring for others. So thank you. Thank you. You all are seeing in the chat box, we have a whole series around this. We've got 2 reflective calls coming after this speaker event. So we invite you to join us. We'll have one in October and one in November. If you like this, join us. It's going to be a virtual space to slow down and to reflect on these ideas and concepts and practices, and to set goals and intentions and to move toward them. So we hope you'll join us. You can see Lisa has posted that continuing the Returning with Resilience series link. Also, we have a post-event survey there at the bottom. We ask you to please complete it. I think it's 1 or 2 questions, super quick, but it allows us to know what we're doing well and what we can do better. So thank you again to our speaker, Nikita. Thank you all so much for your participation and just all that you all do to care for others in your work. And we hope to see you in our part 2 and 3 of this series. Lots of gratitude coming in the chat box.